Hi, Sandy Anderson back here, and I am continuing my case study for EDL 854 about the budget debacle. We had just evaluated the pros and cons of the three different plans proposed, and so I had just evaluated the third plan and went through all these pros and cons. And so considering that, I would choose option number 3. To kind of elaborate on what option number 3 would look like, I feel like the steps and the processes in which I would go through would be to contact the superintendent, and then after doing that, the other building administrators to communicate the facts of the event, reaching out to the superintendent first. Pending on what the superintendent stated, I might consult with a school attorney to determine the potential criminal involvement of the school district, just to learn a little bit more about the legalities and liabilities that happen when illegal activity occurs on your premises and affiliated with you, just to see and evaluate if there is any other potential risks for the school at that point. After doing so, I think this is kind of a twofold plan here. The first would be to address the resource allocation issue that this is kind of uncovering, and that would be that supplemental curriculum is not equitable at all elementary schools within the district because it's completely funded by fundraiser efforts. That means that if you've got a very motivated fundraising president, kind of like we did, then you will provide more opportunity for the students within your school, and that does create an issue. Also evaluating that the current resources that are distributed to the schools within the district do align with the mission and objectives that the district has laid out for student learning. And then if kind of considering at the beginning of the case study when they explained this, they said that everything was kind of focused towards those core objectives or core learning, and then evaluating if as a district we need to reevaluate what our mission and our objectives are for the students within our district, if it is just very academic focused or if we're looking at the student as a whole. So that might be a much bigger issue that needs to be addressed, but also does need to be considered when working through developing this plan. I would suggest the restructuring of district systems and long-term budgeting to fund supplemental curriculums with an equitable approach. That way all students have all opportunities. I'd also reconsider the level of influence on curriculum choices that parents might have that could cause oversight for legal boundaries, such as the way fundraising is approached, and it could also jeopardize the success and well-being of students and adults. To develop and adopt really curriculum that is standard focused by the state standards that are put out, I feel like it would kind of be a backwards approach to have options given to teachers that are going to teach it and then selecting from that. I feel like it could almost be an opposite type approach where the teachers find access to those curriculums for those supplemental resources, and then if parents want to be on a site council and advocate in that way, absolutely can, but just kind of recognizing the professionals in the situation and making sure that we are aligning to what we say we will do. Then also generating possible avenues that can be taken to fund this year's purchase of supplemental materials at Briardale Elementary. So thinking outside the box, thinking about potential grants that are available. Evaluating the current resources that we have. Is what we currently have enough? And can we expand on that in ways that don't bring on additional financial obligation? Considering the availability of funds at the district level to possibly fill this gap of funding, and then also additional potential legal fundraisers that could possibly be had. But before doing that, I think it's appropriate to consider the second side of this issue, and that would be the protocol for fundraising within the district. I think it would be important to propose a district protocol specifically for the foundation or PTO, probably as I think of it, and making sure that there are fundraising procedures that are followed, that there's an audit of proper allocation of those raised funds, and As within anything, that there's a multifaceted approach to the accountability for funds that are raised. It just protects everyone in the situation, and I think that oversight exists for a reason. Also, I think a good approach to this could be to generate a infographic that kind of communicates the who, what, when, where, and why of fundraising, by identifying who fundraisers can involve, identifying who can utilize the profits and how those profits can be utilized, because there are laws that dictate the way those funds can be used and where they may go to, especially considering core curriculums that need to be funded equitably rather than by fundraisers. Also considering what fundraisers are legal. If your state is a state that bans raffles or any other type of fundraisers, knowing if you are a registered nonprofit, knowing if you are operating under the blanket of a school or a separate entity. Also knowing when fundraisers can be conducted. I know in the state of Kansas, a raffle can occur once a year, I believe, is the stipulation on that, but just really diving further into the law and knowing that, knowing why fundraisers occur. I think it's important for stakeholders to understand what the purpose behind the fundraisers are and how those funds will be used. Develop a protocol for communicating these legalities with all potential people involved in orchestrating a fundraiser. I know I use the word protocol a lot, but I think it's important to establish those on paper, and that way there's a systematic approach to prevent these things from happening. And it also helps to more accurately communicate these expectations with everybody involved, so it leaves less room for error. Then, pending the consultation of the attorney earlier in this plan, possibly putting forth a statement in regards to the arrest, what is being done to prevent it, and how it's being reconciled as our reputation as Briardale Elementary. So, imagining how I would implement this decision, I feel like the plan that is developed evaluates the current deficits, it acknowledges them, it analyzes the pros and the cons. I know that this is not a picture-perfect solution. I haven't been able to think of a picture-perfect solution. I look forward to listening to other videos in case there is one. I think it also provides actionable recommendations. It doesn't just say, we're going to change. It says, this is how we're going to change, and this is what we are going to do to change. And then it implements a systematic approach for the prevention of things like this happening again. I think it's important to consider if the school is legally responsible for fundraising efforts, if we're liable as well, or if it is just on the president. I think that's important to know and to take ownership of. Then considering future changes, ensuring systems of accountability that demand compliance with fundraising guidelines, and ensuring that there is equitable resource allocation throughout the district for all curriculums. Then Plan B, if no resources are accessed to fund supplemental curriculum, basically at the end of the day, the curriculum is kind of one of the twofold issues, but if there's no funds for it, if there's no grants available, if the district has no more money and they're just out of luck, like what's actually going to happen? Because this happens more than most people know. I think it'd be important to look at the building budget, evaluate that, identify any potential areas where costs can be cut or money can be saved. And then I think it's very important to be transparent with staff. I think the more transparent you are with your staff, the easier it is for them to accept the reality of those situations. Develop and evaluate a list of needs and wants for purchases that are typically funded through fundraisers, and then kind of prioritizing that information as well, I think might be a good approach to if the current plan of trying to seek other funding opportunities doesn't work out. So considering my reflection for this, I'm going to kind of summarize what I have here so I'm not just reading off of a screen. But this really did challenge my thinking. As a previous classroom teacher, I know that it seemed so hard because most of the grants that were available always seemed to extend student learning, or it was outside of the box student learning activities that would usually be funded. When the reality of being in the classroom was that I just wanted the basic core parts of our curriculum, such as maybe online access to things that are directly aligned with what we're teaching, or maybe decodable books that enhance the curriculum and go hand in hand with it. But it seemed so much harder to gain access to the necessities for the curriculum rather than things that were really pretty and fun in addition to it, such as classroom projects. And all those things are incredibly valuable, and I highly value that, and I am thankful for those who fund those opportunities. But this did kind of help expose to me why that might be so difficult. And the equitability of that issue, I think, is the biggest part. That when you start to change the access to the core curriculum in which students are receiving, that becomes a huge issue. That's when you want to live on the north side of the tracks or the south side of the tracks. And I think that's when in education we can fall short sometimes, and schools don't provide the same opportunities for all students in different areas. So it did really help develop my knowledge and understanding of the reason why it was harder to do that. And it just really gave me a different lens to look through as a building principal, and kind of considering that into any future positions that I move into, and learning how to advocate for an equitable budget that meets the needs as much as it is able to, because the reality is it's not always funded in that way. So how can we systematically approach that? One thing that I hadn't mentioned there, that just kind of thinking as I'm reflecting through this, would be if there were to be a district pool of fundraiser funds, and then that would be distributed. I know that's hard for parents, just setting at various bond proposal meetings, PTO meetings, all of the things that parents want their money to go to directly to their children. And I completely understand that. We all want to do what is best for our kids, but I also see children who might not have that opportunity provided to them. And I think it's important to consider what our role is in public education and how we can best service all students and become the great equalizer that they deserve. So thank you for listening.